2011 has been characterized by a large number of natural and man-made disasters.
There was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of turmoil, but General Kimmich was the person who spoke on behalf of the coalition members every day on television. I remember he was steady, he was reassuring, and he always had the confidence.
Natural disasters included terrible floods, earthquakes, tsunamis, and of course the Japanese experience of the earthquake and flood at Fukushima. But they've been accompanied as well by what I can only call the man-made horrors. The assassinations and the massacres in the Congo and in West Africa. The oil spill off Brazil, which Chevron has to deal with, as BP did in the case of the Gulf. The clash between Turkey and Israel over the storming of the vessel Marmara while I was in Istanbul. And of course the even riots in London. Some of you may remember, though they were overblown and they have, I think, been pretty severely punished. But the United States has not been immune to man-made disasters. As our spending exceeded our revenues, state after state, in particular California, have gone bust. And there are just two further general points that I want to make before I come to the specifics. One is that China not only has overtaken Japan as the second largest economy, it is on track to outproduce the United States within the next 15 to 20 years. There is concern, of course, about the downturn of the Chinese rate of growth. It's actually declined from about 10.5% to something between 7 and 8%. But compare that with the best we can expect in America, perhaps 3% or less, and the prospects in Europe, where the rate of growth is now almost certain to be far less than 2%. The Chinese, in every respect, are catching up, and they're moving up the value chain. For example, China is now purchasing more. Now let me turn now very rapidly to the 4 or 5 subjects I want to cover. And I begin, of course, with the Middle East. The Arab Spring didn't begin in Egypt. It actually began in Tunisia. And they have begun to add to the support that Israel has enjoyed from the banking people in New York, from their Jewish fellow citizens in Miami, and to some extent Los Angeles, and from the conscience that Americans have always had about the Holocaust. So it is difficult to impose a solution on the Israelis. And I'll come back to that in a moment when I speak about Iran. But if we continue to allow the Palestine problem to fester, the Middle East will never have peace. Now let me turn now to Iran. In a way, my favourite country. I spent a deal of time in Iran. I think I've been there some 20 or 30 times. I have many friends. The former Foreign Minister of Iran, Bolourchi, the Shah's son-in-law, was my host last month in Montreux in Switzerland. And as many of you present know, I have many friends among the Iranian community in Orange County and Los Angeles.
When was the last time you were in Tehran?
2 years ago.
2 years ago?
Yeah, I went up to the Caspian. I went to Rosh to see what the...
That's a nice place. Yeah.
Well, the earthquake, the Greens had covered it over. And I went up to the other city up there, I've forgotten which. I went down to Qom, to Isfahan.
Did you meet with any of Ayatollahs?
Well, I was, of course, met some of them, and I was quite taken, actually, by... it's in my book.
Thank you, JP. That was beautiful. Please join me in welcoming our guest speaker, Brigadier General Mark Kimmick.
Well, as is so often the case, that's one of those introductions that your mothers would love to hear and your wives would become instantly suspicious.
After we spent nearly $1 trillion, was it worth it, the casualties and so forth, and I think you've done a good job in trying to summarize that as quick as we can.
Well, no, I'll answer that question because it's a legitimate question. The fact remains, any time you try to quantify the value of the war, was it worth 4,500 American soldiers? You know, that's the question I would ask in return is, what is this country willing to put its soldiers at risk for? Saddam Hussein, forget about all the popular myth. The fact is, Saddam Hussein was responsible for genocidal conduct inside of his own country. He was systematically wiping out the Shia in the south. He had committed genocide against the Kurds in the north. He was a brutal dictator who was starving his own people. American soldiers spent years and years living in the palaces that Saddam built during the years that his country was starving from the UN sanctions. You can never quantify the value of an American life. You can never quantify the value of a soldier who is either lost or who has now had their lives inalterably changed because massive wounds incurred in Iraq. It's an easy question to ask. It's a cheap question to ask because no, the answer is you can't put a value on American lives.
No.
But you don't get to do it over.
Yeah.
Yep.
How do you think Iran will respond now that we're out of Iraq?
I think they're breaking open the apple cider tonight in Tehran. Why wouldn't they be? They've been looking for this day for years and years. They realized the Iranian regime, and there are people in this room far more capable of speaking about this than I, but the Iranian regime is revolutionary in nature, has a hegemonic aspiration to take over the region. Why wouldn't they be happy that now they can increase their reach without having to worry about the Americans being inside of Iraq? And imagine if and when they develop a nuclear weapon, how they can use that in a program of coercive diplomacy. And Sir Elton, you and I should talk about this, but I believe they're going to use the weapon never physically use it, but use it in a program of coercion to convince the countries in the region to eject American forces from Bahrain, from Kuwait.